Hello everyone, welcome to my rank 3 clear of Deathsmiles. Here you can see we'll be playing on the Nintendo Switch port, which has a few problems that I guess I could go over while we're waiting to get to the replay. So I ended up buying the physical version of this game. I just saw that it was on sale somewhere and I thought it would be cool to own a cave game in some physical capacity. So it ended up being the Clear River version, which is separate from the more limited print, strictly limited games released, I believe. But an issue with this particular version is that actually it does not update correctly. I believe the latest update is 1.04, but this cart only goes up to 1.01. However, recently it came to my attention that you can actually get the DLC for free on this physical release as well, which I don't believe was something that was advertised. So this is just a long way for me to say that I'm playing the DLC characters for this clear, and I selected Ranun. I believe that's her name for reasons that I'll explain throughout the run. So with that out of the way, we're starting with this Lakeshore stage first at rank 3. Usually you see people start with the Port Town as the first stage just because it defaults you to that one, and it's relatively easy. However, if you go into Death Mode, which is, the mode of the game where you pick rank 3 enough times and suicide bullets start being fired, then you get to the point where, or if you go to Port Town during Death Mode, you actually get a lot of extend items, which is something I didn't realize until I kind of looked up the game in more detail. So in order to help facilitate survival throughout the run, I opted to take that stage in Chapter 3. So speaking about this stage in particular, what I'm really just trying to do is build up my item count so I can get full up to 1,000 as soon as possible. And when you get to 1,000 in this game, you can activate this thing called Power Up Mode, which is essentially your hyper, and it's your main scoring mechanic throughout the game. So essentially you score nothing if you're not in hyper, and when you're in hyper, that's when you score all your points. So I didn't mention, but I'm going to try to be doing a little bit of scoring throughout this run, which is why you might notice that my final score ends up being a little bit higher than you would otherwise see for a survival run that doesn't go through the canyon, which is the extra stage, but goes through rank 3 everywhere else. And I'll point those specific points out to you. But for now, you can see that I'm at item count level 1,000 now, and I'm ready to take it to the next stage. So we're gonna get to the first boss here, which isn't super exciting, but you still have to kind of be on your toes regardless. So Ranun, she has a pretty powerful lock shot, or a focus shot, which is really just, laser beam firing from her familiar, and like her shot is just in a straight line. Take a small hit there, but it's only half health because I ran into a cube as opposed, or environmental hazard as opposed to bullet. So that's one thing about this game as well to take note. But what I was saying about Ranun is that she has a pretty powerful focus shot, but also you can see that her familiar fires these giant glowing yellow spheres that also do kind of tick damage when they stick to the boss. So when you see that I'm holding the focus shot, I'm also alternating between rapid fire and focus in order to also get the familiar to spew out those glowing spheres as well. So that's one kind of trick that I use a lot throughout this run to kind of speed kill bosses faster. So again, it's really just alternating between focus and rapid fire buttons in order to have the familiar shoot out the glowing spheres and also use the focus shot. So here's the second stage that I go to. This is the graveyard, I believe. No, this is the swamp level, sorry. They all kind of blend together after a while. So one cool thing about Deathsmiles that I didn't mention earlier, but I kind of talked about, was you can kind of choose the stage order, and the difficulty is adjusted depending on what point throughout the run you get a certain stage, or you pick a certain stage. So there are 6 stages to start with that you can pick, and then you have the final stage and the EX stage. And how it works, which is kind of confusing if you just listen to what I'm saying, but when you play the game, it'll make more sense. You start from the bottom 3, and then you alternate between top and bottom stages in groups of 2. And for each group of 2, it's called a chapter. So right now we're still in chapter 1, and we're in the second stage of chapter 1. So here you can see what I'm going to do is I'm going to cancel the bullets to go into power up mode. and then I'm going to kill this enemy. And at this point, you can see that I've maxed my bonus or my hidden counter. You can see that's why there's a lot of 1,000 or 10,000 gold numbers being spouted about everywhere. And so the reason why I guess the scoring is kind of ridiculous in this game and why it's so visually kind of chaotic is because when you're in power-up mode, everything that you shoot spews extra point items. And those point items, of course, are multiplied by this kind of or not multiplied, but they're augmented. The point values are augmented by this counter that you can see is now maxed out at 1,000. Here I'm going to try to go for some, oh actually I didn't go for it, but so a lot of people like to go for what's called a bomb recharge strat as well, or sorry, not bomb recharge, but power-up recharge. And essentially what happens is, if you exit the power-up mode, so if that counter on the bottom left goes from 1,000 to 0, while you're killing enemies and having them drop the items, then if you time it just right, you're able to pick up the really high value items just as soon as you exit the power-up mode. And then as you're gathering the items, you go back up to item level 1000, and then you can activate your power-up mode again. So that's something I'll show off a bit later, but I didn't attempt it in this stage at least. So this is Sakura. She's the boss of the swamp level, and she's also a playable character in the Mega Black Label version of this game. She's actually really, really powerful in that version. For here, she's just a relatively simple boss. This pattern is a little confusing, but you just have to make sure to have your familiar above you or below you, such that you can kill those pods. And, you know, otherwise she's not too big of a deal, especially with some of the speed kill strategies. The one that I explained in the previous stage, she goes down without having to dodge too much. So now I'm going to go into Forest of the Lost, which is a stage that is really lucrative if you're playing for score. Is actually really important if you're playing for score, but is pretty difficult overall. So as far as survival goes, you kind of don't want to get the stage when your death mode is activated. So that means you don't want the stage second to last in your run, because as you can see, it's kind of constricted in its play space. There's a lot of the environmental hills and valleys that you kind of have to wade through, and it's also very dense with bullets. So if you add suicide bullets on top of the mix, which is what happens in death mode, then you're going to have a hard time. However, as you can see, there's a lot of large enemies, and when you're in power-up mode, they spawn a lot of items, which is really helpful for your score. So here you can see I'm trying to use the lock shot, because killing those giant islands with the lock shot actually produces more items. And what I'm trying to do right now is just to get my item count to 1,000. If I were really good, I could have gotten a recharge in the previous stage, so I wouldn't, need to be fighting for those items now. But because I wasn't that good, I had to activate pretty late into the stage. And you can see I'm finally starting to get some items being dropped. And I didn't mention this, but power-up mode also makes you slightly stronger as well, so it'll help with this boss fight, which isn't, again, too bad. There's actually a safe spot that I don't take advantage of, but any little bit helps. So the first attack from this Wispy Woods looking boss, this tree boss, isn't so bad. You just need to be aware of the fact that you can actually dodge this attack by going to the bottom of the screen, as I demonstrated. I speed killed that phase that kind of exploded while I was talking, so you don't get to see it there. But this pattern actually has a safe spot. It's on the very top of the screen. And I think the way that you place yourself is you use the second bomb counter. But I think why I didn't go for it here is because I didn't have a second bomb. So I thought, okay, well, I'll just try to dodge it. You can see here I didn't fully dodge it. I actually ran into an environmental hazard, and that took me down half a life. That's one thing that I didn't mention. If you collide with an enemy or an environmental hazard, anything that's not a bullet, you actually take half damage instead of full damage, which is actually really nice. Because I think the game recognizes that there are a lot of instances where enemies kind of come in from both sides of the screen, or from below you, or from on top of you, and flank you. And for a character like Ranun, she actually is pretty slow, so sometimes you just can't react fast enough if you're not aware of the enemies already to avoid that. So it's nice that it doesn't take a full life out. So here is where I'm going to be trying to go for another power-up. It's kind of a shame because I have a route practiced where if I had full item meter at the very beginning of the stage, I could have gotten a lot of points. But unfortunately, I kind of really messed up the forest stage by kind of powering up super late. So I didn't have enough item counter to implement that strategy. However, it does work out slightly to my favor here because I still get a lot of points anyway. And you can see here that I acquired a life up item there. So how that spawns is dependent on what stage you pick, in what chapter you obtain it. So in chapter 2, if you're at rank 3, so it's also dependent on rank, but if you're at rank 3, chapter 2, graveyard stage, that orc actually drops a 1-up item, and it gives you actually half an extent, not a full one. So that's something that I would recommend looking up the chart if you'd like to plan your own route while playing this game. I should also mention, I like playing Ranun, not because she's the best survival character. Actually, that's Follett, which I have a really dingy clear, scuffed clear of this game, not at rank 3 with that character. But the reason why I play Ranun is because she actually seems to do a little bit less damage than the other DLC characters, which kind of helps produce more score items, which helps boost the score. So I was just finding that I was getting much better scores with this character than the others because she does a little bit less damage. But she's still really powerful and can speed kill a lot of the bosses, no problem. Speaking of bosses, this is a really gross looking boss. I mean, I really hate the way he looks, but thankfully it's not too difficult to take down, especially this attack that's coming up. So with Ranun, she actually fires those yellow orbs, as I mentioned before. But because they spread out on top of the boss sprite, it actually kills these purple hearts, which are supposed to kind of like seek towards you and cause you to mess up. But because the yellow orbs are placed on top of the boss's sprite, they also explode because that's where the purple hearts spawn. So you don't really have to deal with dodging that at all, which is really convenient. So Ranun also is a pretty powerful character, especially for killing bosses. So this is the first stage where we're going to have death mode activated. You can see here that when I kill enemies now, they shoot suicide bullets. So the port town, actually, I choose this in chapter 3 for a couple of reasons. The first is that it's usually the first stage people play when they start this game. So it's generally pretty easy, or it's easier than some of the other stages for sure. The second reason is because for some reason in death mode, that orc drops a half life up item, and there's going to be another one at the end of the stage. So that's kind of ridiculous, right? Because I'll just spoil this for you now, you're going to get 4.5 life up items with this route throughout the course of the game, plus the 2 score extents. That's a lot for a cave game at least, and not something that I was really expecting. But that's very much appreciated because it kind of helps with the survival so much that you kind of, at least in my mind, you kind of also start to hunger for, getting better scores as well. Or at least that was kind of my gateway into also wanting to learn some of the scoring strategies for this game, where I don't really have to worry so much about survival that, I would de-emphasize scoring at all. Here it's kind of more of a balance. And I think a lot of that has to do with having all those resources, being able to make mistakes, and having, well, I mentioned this, but having so many bombs, because you get 3 bombs per death, and you get so many extends throughout the course of the game that you have a lot of bombs. So you have a lot of opportunities to make mistakes. This Grim Reaper boss is kind of tricky if you don't have the speed kill strat down. So that last pattern, you can see that I speed killed it before that pattern became a problem. But it can be messed up. Okay, and look at this pattern. This is actually kind of, this pattern can really mess you up. So you can see here, I get hit twice, really like in quick succession. So this game actually doesn't have a very lenient invul window, and that's pretty much demonstrated here. But that's one of the things that you really want to worry about, or really want to be cautious about when fighting this Grim Reaper boss. at rank 3, because that last pattern, it's kind of random how the scythes aim at you, and although they only do half a point of damage, you know, sometimes they're hard to avoid. So now we're in the Volcano stage. This is stage 6, the last one before the final stage, and here I'll demonstrate some score strategies that really help crank your score. You get a lot of score from this stage. You can see here what I'm just doing is I'm milking the rocks coming out. You can see they're producing score items. Now I'm already at the hidden counter of 10,000, which means that I've maxed that hidden counter, and these score items are worth a lot now. You can see just how much I'm cashing out by milking those rocks. My score is ticking up dramatically to the point where my score will be doubled or something crazy like that by the time I get out of this stage. Okay, so here's a very particular recharge strat, which I learned from Neon Dagger's video. But if you kind of go towards the right and bomb at this point of the stage, while holding lock shot, you can actually recharge your bomb, repower up, and continue milking these enemies, these rocks, and bringing your score up. So I kind of simplified that explanation a bit because it's really fast, commentating over this replay. But if you're interested in learning how that kind of works and trying to see how you can do it for yourself, I'll have a link to that video by Neon Dagger in the description. You can see here, though, I'm just kind of doing the same thing. I'm just finding the areas where these rocks are spawning, and then I'm farming them while I'm in power up mode. I'm already at a score of over 100 million, which is kind of crazy. I mean, if you watch like normal rank 3 death mode level 1 clears, which this is a clear, this is a clear of that kind of difficulty level. You can go through the entire game in a survival mode without scoring at all, and you can get, under 100 million easily. And that's just because the way scoring works in this game is that you don't really score anything unless you implement some of these strategies and spend a lot of your time in power-up mode. So that's kind of an interesting thing about this game, and why I'm proud of this score, even though I've made so many mistakes that I could probably get 200 million if I had implemented them correctly. But anyway, I'm just rambling on. I also got my last 1-up extend, which is a full 1-up, not a half 1-up, from the orc that I killed way up earlier in that stage. So just getting another health up item. You can see that I took so many hits throughout the run, but I'm at full extends right now. So this is the stage, or the Volcano stage boss. Not super difficult, but you just want to be a little bit wary of the falling rocks. Here I'm in kind of a bad position because I would really want to have my familiar above me so that it breaks some of these rocks. But I was able to kind of get through it without taking any chip damage. So these lava pillars here actually fire revenge bullets when you shoot them, so I'm trying to be a little bit prudent in when to destroy them. But there's actually a way to skip that pattern where you kind of just run to the very front and bypass the lava pillars entirely. And here I'll show off a kind of a safe spot where you can just speed to kill the dragon before they really do this next pattern by just hanging out near its neck area. So all in all, you can kind of no off that boss pretty reliably. It's actually one of the easier bosses to fight against. So now we're going to the castle stage. So as I said before, this is a death mode level 1 clear, which means that I don't go to the canyon. And how this works is that you enter death mode level 1 if you go to at least 5 stages at rank 3. If you go to the canyon level, it levels up your death mode to level 2. And then afterwards in castle, it goes to death mode level 3. But because we don't go to canyon, we're only in death mode level 1. And the only difference between that is really, well, at least to my knowledge, the suicide bullets get crazy fast, and also some bosses get new patterns. So that, as you can imagine, that's kind of ridiculous. So I'm starting with this death mode level 1 rank 3 clear, just to get attuned to how to really play this game effectively. But I'd like to try to go to the canyon at some point. I was watching replays and it just seemed ridiculous. Speaking of ridiculous, this opening part to stage Hades Castle, even in level 1 death mode, is still really hard. And that just comes from the fact that the suicide bullets come at you from all sides, because the enemies come at you from all sides of the stage. And it's just super dense. You can see here that there are just a lot of enemies, and a lot of them can be very dangerous, like those green dragons. I'll point them again later. And they're already difficult enough to dodge when you're playing this game normally, but when you go into death mode, you have to worry about the suicide bullets, and that just becomes even crazier. Of course, your saving grace is that, and I didn't mention this earlier, but your familiar actually absorbs the suicide bullets, which can help you, you know, chart a way for yourself if you're really good at manipulating that familiar. But I'm not that great at it yet, if ever. So yeah, it's giving me a hard time for sure. One thing that's really helpful for surviving the stage, though, is being in power-up mode. And that's because not only is there more slowdown, because you're generating so many more sprites on the screen by killing things, spawning the items, etc., but also in power-up mode, you don't actually take damage from colliding with enemies. You take damage from colliding with bullets, of course, but you can kind of move through the sprites of enemies. And that is really helpful in a stage like Stage 5, where enemies are flanking you from all sides. So rather than having to kind of avoid their sprites entirely, and they can be quite large, you can kind of fly through them and seal their bullets and destroy them before they become a huge problem. And so definitely a thing that, or a survival strat, is to be in power mode as much as possible throughout the stage. Of course, it's really difficult because if you take a hit, as far as like taking a bullet, you're going to be knocked out of power mode. So I try to use all my bombs before that, saving one for this enemy because you can see the suicide bullets kind of poured moving there. Anyway, this part of the stage is incredibly hard, and that's because of the flanking that I mentioned earlier. The familiar is really helpful when you're kind of trying to absorb suicide bullets coming at you from one direction. But when they come at you from all directions, you can't really swing it around that fast, or at least I'm not able to do that. So yeah, it's just, you're gonna get walled like a situation like that. But thankfully, I took a death, right? But they took one of my lives, but now I have 3 more bombs to try and wade my way through this sea of bullets as much as I can. A thing that is kind of weird, and something that might take some getting used to, is how the suicide bullets kind of spawn on on an enemy that's dying or exploding. Sometimes they can kind of spawn and surround you, which is actually really, really mean. And if the bullets manage to slip through, then you're just taking a hit right there. So you really want to be careful about something like that. You can see here that I'm going back into power mode, hopefully to get more slowdown so I can dodge these patterns a bit easier. Another thing that I didn't mention is you can bomb in power mode, and that's something that I showed earlier in the run, but it really dramatically decreases your counter. So it decreases the amount of time that you're in power mode if you bomb in it drastically. And so, if you bomb, you're essentially saying, okay, like, I'm giving up this super powerful mode where I'm not only scoring a lot, but I'm also surviving better as a way to avoid immediate death. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic there, but I'm just trying to say, like, power-up mode is really strong, but there are some caveats involved as well, and some tough decisions to make. You can see here that the game is really slowing down. Lots of enemies being put on the screen, lots of items, lots of score. I think that's one of the things that I really enjoy about this game. It's just really ridiculous, and I've heard this game being called like a visual diarrhea game, and I totally agree, because all the things happening on screen is just sensory overload, in a positive way, in my opinion, or really, dopamine-inducing way. So we're close to the end of the first part of Stage 5. The second part is very short, so I guess I should say we're almost done with Stage 5. You can see here I've taken a lot of hits. I think I've taken like 3 hits already. And yeah, I think it's just kind of a testament to how difficult this stage is and how long it is. Those Centaur Aquaman enemies, I don't know. Super annoying. I'm glad I had a bomb to do with them, because I didn't want to get to their level, like at the bottom floor, because I just didn't want to get point blank by some suicide bullets. So one thing that I want to really be aware of going into this last part of stage 5 is that I want to have 1000 meter, and I want to take that all the way to the final boss. And the reason for that is because if you no bomb the first part of the final boss, Jitterbug, then he gives you 2 free extends, which is ridiculous. It's just insane. So you really want to make sure that happens. And I want the 1000 item count because then I could go into power-up mode. And power-up mode makes me stronger as well, so able to speed kill that boss a bit easier. These dancing couple enemies are super annoying normally, but in Death Node, they're especially annoying. And the reason for that is, again, because of the suicide bullets. They're like coming at you from these weird angles, you know, they're firing stuff, they're trying to point blank you, and then also the suicide bullets happen. So thankfully I have these bombs. I'm on my last extend now, they clipped me once, but I'm going to have enough bombs to make it out. Got really lucky there that I didn't, I collided with one of the enemy sprites and not a bullet, because that would have been game over. But, you know, I'm being a little bit greedy not bombing, I don't know why, but I'm glad I got through. And now we're on the final boss. So, I think that the DLC characters are pretty, pretty good at speed killing this boss. You know, I think that's just a testament to how strong they are, because you can just look at this. I powered up, and I'm just point blanking this thing, shooting as many as these yellow orbs as possible onto him, while also focusing. So using the focus shot, which does more damage. You can see here just how fast he's being melted. If you watch a replay of someone trying to fight Jitterbug with like Windia or like Follette, it's like night and day. I mean, you have to dodge like 3 of his patterns, but I didn't even have to get through the first pattern, and he was dead already. So, I don't know. I think like even if this character that I'm playing right now, Ranun, isn't like the optimal survival character where you could speed kill him even faster, I mean, Ranun isn't really hurting too much in that department either. And she apparently seems to score better, at least in my hands. Can't speak to what an actual super player might say, but you know, seems to work better for me. So here is Tyranno Satan, the final boss of the game. That isn't a secret boss that you can only get in Mega Black Label. You know, it's usually, the boss is usually not too hard. I take a really stupid death there. I think I'm just cocky at this point because I know that I'm going to clear. Essentially, with this amount of bombs and these amount of lives, you know, it's really hard to mess up if you know, have played against Tyranno Satan before and kind of know the attacks that he's going to do. So for example, this is kind of an attack where you want to be shooting to the right to destroy his claws while also dodging the stuff on the left. You know, if you trust that you're going to be destroying the claws, it's really not too difficult to dodge. However, I do want to just use my bombs in case I get clipped by something stupid again, or that I just fail at dodging something basic. And then finally we're on the last phase. This one's really cool. I mean, I like how desperate it looks and how it's slithering around. You know, it has an uncanny habit of ramming into you, which is something that I let happen to me there. But as I said, I still have so many bombs left. I'm not really in too much danger, even though I'm going to fail dodging this pattern here too. Honestly though, even with that many mistakes, I think it's just a testament to how doable this clear is if you take this route where you get all those life up items. And also how fun scoring can be, I suppose, while being incorporated into this kind of level 1 survival, level 1 death mode survival clear. So that's, you know, the run. I just wanted to show like this ending here because I wasn't really able to see that many completed runs on YouTube with this particular character. And you know, I was just kind of curious what the ending would be. Kind of a bummer with the DLC characters though is that they don't have any new like recorded voice acting, which I feel like could have been a pretty easy thing to do. But no, they just used the voice lines from the original version and kind of substitute each character. Like Rosa, I think, is the voice of this character here. But I mean, it's okay. I mean, I can't complain, I guess. I'm not really familiar with the world and the mobile game that these characters come from. Um, but I think that overall the DLC characters were all really fun. They all have like different shot types, and some of them are really out there, like Plumeria's, for example, which is kind of like it shoots like a an obtuse angle from your hitbox that doesn't shoot like straight up and straight in front of you, which is kind of interesting. I don't know how people play that ship or that character, but it's unique nonetheless. So I guess I should just say a few words about my overall thoughts about this game. I think that the scoring in this game is actually really fun. Um, I don't usually play cave games for a score, and I think just that's just because they're so difficult that after I get the clear, I'm like, oh, I need a break. You know, like I've I focused so hard on surviving, and I did it. How can I do these crazy tricks on top of that? It seems really insurmountable. But for a game like this, where I just demonstrated, I took so many stupid hits that really, you know, that were really like you could have dodged if you really were paying attention and had some, you know, experience with the game. Um, I took all those hits, and yet I still was able to clear. I had half a life left, um, and still was able to go through the boss no problem. So that's just kind of a testament to, well, you know, I think this game has a more an accessible um, skill floor, I guess, such that it kind of opens its way up to also exploring other things like scoring, for example. And that's kind of what I hoped I demonstrated here. So with that being said, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.